Big time fight coming up at women's strawweight. We have Brazil's Amanda Lemos taking on Montserrat Ruiz. And Matt, we had it as Montserrat Conejo. It should be Conejo, so we're going to go with Montserrat Conejo. In this fight, Mexico's own Conejo is a really interesting specimen because she trains out of King's MMA. She also trains out of 10th Planet. She has an insane wrestling pedigree. And you know what? We talked a lot about it in her debut when she took on Cheyenne Base. So let's throw it on over to that intro. We'll throw it on back to this fight because I think that stylistically, this makes for a really interesting match. Taking on Montserrat Ruiz. Her nickname is Conejo. It means rabbit. And if you really look at it on Tapology, it's rabbit mad. And I'm rabbit mad. I'm really looking forward to this fight because for Montserrat Ruiz, we look at her overall. She trains with King's MMA. You saw her in the corner of Jocelyn Edwards over on Fight Island. And listen, it didn't work out in Jocelyn's second fight. It happens against Carol Hossa. But if you look at it in her debut, it went swimmingly against Wu Yanan. And for Montserrat Ruiz, I mean, just an awesome amount of pressure. I know I went back and I watched some of the pre-fight stuff for Invicta debut when she took on one really tough out UFC vet Danielle Taylor. And listen, very stoic and thoughtful woman. I mean, she really picks and chooses what she says, but listen, representing Mexico, she's training now in the States, and she really talked about the fact that she began her mixed martial arts journey in wrestling. She ended up coming to the States, starting to round things out a little bit. Her jiu-jitsu's getting better, striking's getting better. And you can see that from the time that she was with some of the smaller promotions in Mexico, all the way up to her XFL fight for the strawweight title, way back about 3 years ago now against Sarai Sains. She picked up a big win there. But you watch her fight in that fight, and then you watch forward to Danielle Taylor, and then you watch forward against Janessa Moranjan. I mean, a huge amount of growth in her game. I mean, 9-1 right now. Maybe she was waiting for a UFC call. She finally gets it. Maybe you would have liked to have seen like a contender series spot. I know she was supposed to fight with Invicta for their strawweight title back at the end of last year against Emily Ducati, who's a great fighter. I mean, call it what it is. Her record's a little salty, but since she came over to Invicta, she's put on some very, very good fights. So it's really kind of funny because for Montserrat Conejo, we looked at her coming into the UFC and it was like, okay, well, she has a really good wrestling pedigree, former champion in Mexico, and she loves the head and arm throws. And then she just head and arm through Cheyenne Base. They had that weird ending to the fight, and it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And for Conejo, she's one of those fighters that you kind of look at her physically. She's 5 feet tall. You assume maybe she'd be an atom weight. Now she's taking on a fighter with an extra 4 inches of reach, an extra 4 inches of height, and Amanda Lemos. And this is somebody that finished a former Invicta champ her last time out in the Gangsta, Lavia Souza. She beat Mizuki before that, and then Miranda Granger. And oh, by the way, this is somebody that took years off between fights, went from bantamweight down to strawweight. Her Muay Thai looks on point. Her grappling's on point. She's never been taken down in the UFC, and she's 100% in her takedown attempts. Yeah, I get it. She just turned 34. But Amanda Lemos, to me, almost looks like the real deal.
She really is, and she's very young in fight years. That's the one thing she does have going for her. Although, yes, she is 34 years old, she hasn't taken that much damage, aside from the Leslie Smith fight. But hey, if you fight Leslie Smith, you're probably going to get damaged throughout that fight. Leslie Smith loves to have some fun fights. The problem that a lot of women are going to have when they do fight Amanda Lemos is that she is so powerful for this weight division, is most people just can't have those 50-50 exchanges. For instance, when Jessica I fights, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have noticed this, it's really hard to predict a Jessica I fight, whether win or lose. It's because all of her exchanges are just 50-50. It's just two people coming together. I might land 3 significant strikes this time, you might land 2, and then the other way it's kind of reversed. It's just a lot of kind of equal exchanges happening. The one thing is that when Amanda Lemos lands on these women, they don't really have an answer for that power, and they can't respond with their own power. So they're eating these long straight shots, and that's the thing too about Lemos. She's not a fighter who has to throw hooks to really get on the inside to then accentuate her own power. She can really snipe from the outside. Even look back at her last fight against Lavina Souza. She basically just picks her apart from the outside with the leg kicks and with her long-range weapons. It's not that Montserrat Ruiz can't win this fight. I think if she could really get her judo going early on and tire out Lemos, then maybe there is a path to victory for her. But she's a much smaller fighter. she doesn't really have much by way of striking, so I don't know how she's going to get on the inside. And when you are really good at judo, when you are really good at wrestling, you tend to be very, very heavy on your feet. And when you're fighting someone like Amanda Lemos, who is, I would say, one of the few specialists in the calf and leg kicks in the women's divisions, it's still really hard to ask for Montserrat Conejo, sorry. And for Conejo, this is the thing. Beating Cheyenne Bays doesn't mean you're ready for Amanda Lemos. That's just the honest truth. Like, Cheyenne Bays has a bright future ahead of her, but she's still very green in her MMA career. Amanda Lemos, we talk about her, yes, she might only have 9 fights, but she fights like someone who is much more experienced than she is in her MMA career.
9 wins, 11 fights, both women at 11. And if you look at it for Conejo, just 3 fights ago, now it was 2.5 years ago, she fought Danielle Taylor. She lost that fight, and it was one of those ones where Taylor had already been in the UFC. She's a very good volume striker, picking people apart on the outside. Then after that, she takes on Janisha Marion, ends up finishing her. But again, it's those head and arm throws. Like, it's crazy to see those. And I thought, Cheyenne Bays, you've been training with Emily Ducati. You're going to get it. But she didn't. Can Amanda Lemos figure that one out? I mean, the odds makers seem to think so. Everybody that put money on her really early on, she opened a minus 250 favorite. She's minus 500 right now. It dropped, and it's been steady. For Conejo, she opened plus 210. She's plus 372 average. And if we have a look at Tapology, a perfect 1,000 votes, Matt. Wow. 81% Lemos, 69% by decision for the 19% that have Conejo, 80% by decision. I like Amanda Lemos a lot in this fight. I wish I got her at a minus 250. I know there's going to be a lot of support out there for Montserrat, and I hope to see it continue because I do think she's a really interesting fighter. It'll just be, if she's striking in those absolute wars to get into a clinch, she's going to have a really hard time against Lemos. I might be wrong. I'd love to be wrong, actually, in this sense, but I do like Lemos in this one quite a bit.
I just see Lemos connecting a lot on Ruiz when Ruiz tries to close that distance. For instance, Martin Vettori is a great fighter because he just kind of figured out how to strike his way into the clinch. I know it's a very simple thing to say, but it's something that a lot of MMA fighters don't do that good of a job at. Even Yana Kunitskaya, when she fought Irina Aldana, she would bite to every single feint and just kind of rush forward into the clinch. That's the problem. She doesn't have a way to go from long range to close range. Amanda Lemos doesn't have that problem. She can keep the fight at long range, pepper you with her leg kicks, pepper you with her straight shots down the middle, and it's just going to be a really hard night for Ruiz to close that distance. I agree with you. I do think there is an avenue for Ruiz. I just think it's a very unlikely one, so it's really hard to pick against Amanda Lemos in this fight.
Both of us going with Brazil's Amanda Lemos in this fight. I can't wait for it, and man, we've got some big fights coming up. Lemos' former division in the co-main event at bantamweight. You got the return of the cupcake, Matt. Miesha Tate, she's going to be taking on Marion Reneau. And in the main event, Islam Makhachev taking on one tough out in, Brazil's Thiago Moises. You're not going to want to miss that. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. And as we always say, let's get into it.